Hey everyone, welcome back to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to move the future of work forward. Hey, so if you've noticed, the last episode and the next couple are all about getting you ready for 2025. And honestly, more than just this year, the next 5 years. And so for the last and the next couple, we have visionary leaders that are really going to focus on the vision, the macro trends, and the tactical impacts to both the talent industry, the business industry, and just the macro global economy as a whole. And so I can't wait for you to meet Rishad. From a very, very, very professional and technical perspective, Rishad is a senior advisor over at Publicis. He also was their chief strategist and a strategy and growth officer. Now, take a guess at what we're going to talk about. I'll give you a little hint. It's not just about talent. It's about 5 forces that he believes is fundamentally reshaping companies. So if you're the CEO, you need to be writing every single thing down. If you're the CHRO, you need to be communicating this with your CEO. No matter who you are, these 5 forces are going to fundamentally transform your business, according to Rishad. Now, what are these forces? Well, they're generational shifts, they're technological advancements, they're the rise of gig work and marketplaces, and the lasting effects of COVID-19. And he does predict a move towards a fractional workforce. Notice I didn't say gig, towards a fractional workforce. We also are going to hit on, and this is one of my personal favorite areas, the globalization aspect. Now, I don't know if you listeners know this, but I lived in Singapore for a while. I pretty much have lived on a plane for 8 years now. So when it comes to globalization, once you get outside of whatever country you're in, you realize real quick that there is talent and collaborators and team members that is no different than you, and maybe even more like you, sitting thousands of miles away than the person next to you. And so Rishad's really going to hit on what is the impact of globalization, what areas are doing really, really well, and you're going to hear him talk about the rise of Asia. Now, according to our data, Asia and LATAM are 2 really budding areas. They have the highest growth potential, not the highest volume, but the highest growth potential. Now, I'm going to give you some quick data. From a volume perspective, the US is by far the leader in a flexible and fractional workforce, followed by Europe. The US has around 70 million people working in a fractional flexible capacity. Europe has around between 20 and 30 million. It goes UK, Germany, and Spain or UK, Germany, and France as the leaders. And then if you look at Asia and LATAM, they're the 2 fastest growing. So for this episode and the next couple, I really want you to think 5 years out. I want you to have your roadmaps in front of you, your strategies in front of you, and I want you to feel like you do have control over what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Now, to give you a little summary of the last episode, what do you really need? You need optionality, you need flexibility, and you need what I'm going to call profitability, but it's related to efficiency as well. So, without further ado, enjoy this episode and then go drive some change. Rishad, thank you so much for hopping on. So you, my friend, there will be an intro, but I kind of want to say that you need no intro. I have 2 things in front of me. The first is your upcoming book, Rethinking Work, where you're asking a lot of provocative questions. And so one of the things I saw was, who will people work for? What will organizations actually look like? Why will people work? Where will they work? When will they work? Right? So we're going to dig into a lot of this stuff. And then
Sure.
this isn't your first book, right? You also, every single leadership team is coming to you and asking, where's the future of work going, right? So
Yep.
in your words, how would you describe yourself? And yeah, how would you describe yourself?
So the way I would describe myself is that I am somebody who combines 40 years of working in or working with and working for companies all over the world across almost every size and geography. and with a very mongrel-like career where I've done media and digital and strategy and creative for what used to be what is the Publicis Group, but really working with a lot of different clients. And I did that for 37 years. And for the last 5 years, I worked as a company of one, um, but continue to work with a spectrum of companies as small as 50 people and as large as the Walmarts and Procter and Gambles of the world. Uh, but now as a one-person company. And the common theme is that I help people see, think, and feel differently about how to grow themselves, their teams, and their business. So the way to think about it is I am a catalyst and a stimulant to personal, team, and business
Mm,
growth.
I love it. I love it. And what? So I'm going to ask you some funny questions, okay? And I'm not
Sure,
going to lie, most guests don't get these questions, and so
sure,
this is a very unique one. The first
sure.
question I have for you is someone like you could easily be chilling on a beach, not touching work anymore, right? Like you don't need to be doing this. Why are you still writing books? For those listening, if you hop into the video on Spotify and you see Rishad's bookshelf, you're going to realize he's an avid reader. So why don't you go just chill on a beach?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. So, what I basically believe is I have a definition of what success is. So, a lot of people basically say we want to be successful. So, I basically say to them, okay, and how do you define success? I understand you want to be successful, but how do you define success? And different people have different rulers of what success is. Some people basically talk about making lots of money. Some people basically talk about winning awards. Some people talk about rising to particular levels. Others want to be famous. And so I have a definition, which is one that works for all of them, I think, but works definitely for me, which is success is the freedom to spend time in the ways that give you joy.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I worked at Publicis, which I enjoyed very well and I did for 37 years, I that job gave me joy 70% of the time.
Hmm.
Okay. And it gave me pain 30% of the time. Okay. And that was why I got paid for the 30% pain part of it. Okay. And by pain, it doesn't mean pain was, you lost clients, clients yelled at you had to make quarterly numbers. Sometimes your world class talent would leave. You'd have to like scurry around. You'd get calls in the middle of the night blaming you for things you never did, and sometimes you did. Okay. And your whole stuff was like, hey, I don't control my time sometimes. But it was fantastic. So my thing was for my second career, which is what this is, I wanted to basically have 100% control of my time, as much as a human being can. But if you're married and you have kids, you'd ready to never have 100%. But let's say you have 100% control of your time. So what gave me joy was I liked learning, I liked helping people, and I liked figuring out things. Okay. And so what I now do is I write because that helps me teach and help people as I speak and I advise. So everything I do is I either do writing, which is content creation, or a podcast, a Substack, books. I speak, I do workshops, and then I advise companies. So I'm not doing consulting. So the difference is people say, you do consulting. I said, no, I don't do consulting because consulting is real work. Consultants work really hard. They have deliverables, whether you're a large consultant like a McKinsey or a BCG or a small consultant like a one person company, you have deliverables, you have deadlines and things like that. I do have deliverables. My deliverables are much more softer and they're not as deadline because once I get into that, I just have gone back to work, which is not what I want to do. So why I do this is because it's what I would like to do if I had control of my time. Now, if I were to, and by the way, because of the nature of what I do, it also allows me to travel all over the world. So, like last month in July uh, and the first 2 weeks of August, I've been to Asia twice and Europe once. built around my speaking career. So I take my wife with me and sometimes my kids who are older. And so I basically do the I don't play golf, but I do the, sitting on the beach and vacationing. I've incorporated that into my sort of work. But the other thing is, which is a key thing that I did discover, and this is the fundamental, actual straight answer, besides all these answers, is when I was thinking about what I was going to do next, my wife basically asked, what are you going to do when you stop working at Publicis? So I said, what do you mean? She says, like, okay, let's suppose we've solved the money problem part of it. Okay. When you go somewhere, they're going to ask you, what do you do? What are you going to tell them? So have you solved the identity problem? Okay. You've now worked for 37 years for one company in an industry across the world. You have an entire community of people. And when you stop working, will the community still be talking to you? You like learning. When you don't have all these people challenging you, how are you going to grow? And in the morning when you get up, after a few weeks, is it just going to be like reading books going to be enough? You read books anyway. So the idea really was that to work, you need to basically have, in addition to income, which is very important, what work gives you, you need to have identity, purpose, growth, and community. And so my whole stuff was, my identity was I'm an author and a speaker, but I'm an author, a published author once and now a second time soon, right? I'm a speaker, I'm a teacher. So I can say that. I don't have to say, I used to do this,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm doing is what I actually particularly like. I still work and I advise my old company, so I retain that community. And because I left by me wanting to leave versus somebody asking me to leave, like all my old people want to talk to me still, so I'm not like some banished person, if that makes sense. Um, and so that's the way I do it, which is this is what makes me happy. Now, in effect, the it's turned out that I'm actually pretty good at it. So sometimes it seems like I'm working harder than I was working when I was at Publicist, and I worked really hard. I'm working as hard. The only difference is that 30% of angst doesn't exist. There's zero angst. Okay. And that's what's made me happen. Now, we don't know how long this will go because my whole stuff is at some particular stage. Either my skill set will give out or my health will give out, one of those two. But, till then, we'll do it.
That is awesome. Specifically, you calling
Okay.
out so the 70/30 joy to pain ratio, and then the income, identity, purpose,
Yeah.
and growth. Now, I have a question, but before that, I'm going to ask another question between.
Sure.
Now, world traveler, right? And I think we said so. One of my favorite things about our industry and my industry and sort of my world is similar. It feels like every single day I do a tour of the world, and so I usually start with Asia,
Yep.
then I deal with Europe, then I deal with US, and then it's usually even back to
Yep.
Asia come 8 9 p.m. But so, what areas of the world are really exciting you? And I'll give you one very, very quick little tidbit. My background was a very typical sheltered American that was dropped off in Beijing in 2016 and went, "Oh my God, this is incredible." And so for me, a lot of my world is shaped by looking at China and Singapore and going, "Holy crap, this is
Yep.
incredible what they're doing." But for you, what areas of the world are really exciting you right now?
So I would basically say, very much like you, I believe that the future is happening in Asia. Okay. And I make it a point to have a lot of guests from Asia. The other place where the future is happening, but for a slightly different reason, is in the Middle East, uh, and that's not Asia because that's parts of it is North Africa and parts of it is in between Asia and Europe. Uh, so people, you see a lot of money and a lot of stuff going into Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are coming out of those places. A lot of companies, you see a lot of their business coming from there because they have lots of money. You see that. I was in London for a week and it felt very much like an Arab town, okay, with the Saudi money and the UAE money and a little
Yep.
bit of Russian, okay, but it felt very much like that. But that's money driven. But if you think about energy, momentum, and growth, it's Asia 100%. It's just Asia, Asia, Asia. Um, and you feel it. Like, I love London, I love Paris, right? But they don't feel like the center of the world. They just feel the center of a culture, and very, very important in today's world. And you sort of see it, which is all the growth in the world is taking place pretty much in Asia.
Yeah.
And and Asia, as you know, is so very, very big that it's also very, very different. So, for instance, they are mobile first. There are a lot of other stuff first. But the thing that people don't realize is this AI thing is going to turbocharge Asia much more than anywhere else in the world. Because just like mobility and digital turbocharged it. So they use this to like leapfrog. And one of the key things is the most of the world's store of knowledge, current knowledge, not historic knowledge, current knowledge, engineering knowledge, technology knowledge, has tended to primarily be in English, or maybe French, or maybe German. Okay. Uh, yes, there have been amazing historical stuff in Chinese and Indian and things, and Hindi and stuff like that, Urdu. But what AI does is it removes the barrier of English, of
Interesting.
knowing English, of knowing any of these languages. So now all of a sudden, and on my What Next podcast, I had a guest. It's an Israeli company, and this gentleman was basically telling me that his son says, "Hey, I learn a lot, and I use the world's biggest teacher, which is YouTube. So YouTube is the world's biggest teacher, right?" And so what tends to basically happen, he says, "But Dad, most of these things are in English that I'm trying to learn." So his dad said, "But why don't but most of them have the subtitles." Besides, finding it hard to read the subtitles and listen to the person. So his dad basically started a company which is AI dubbing for emotion. So now they dub for Apple and Netflix. They just take videos and they dub it for emotion. So now what basically begins to happen is language is no longer a barrier to learning. All the world's knowledge is available to you if the only language you know is Telugu, right? And you can now speak in Telugu and it can translate into any language you want. You can get all the world's information and it can be language to you. For $20 a month, you can get any world-class LLM engine. It's revolutionary. And what also happens is, like, for instance, I heard the CEO of GitHub, which is, well, yes, it's a Microsoft company, but he basically described something that was particularly interesting. He says, we've got 100 million software people using GitHub. I expect that number in the next 10 years or 5 years to go to 1 billion. And most of those are going to come from outside the Western world.
Yeah.
Okay, because of the fact simply is the last time there was a technology breakthrough in language was, I think he said, 1992 with Python. So you had COBOL in the 1960s, 1992. Till you got to 2021, 2022 with like Copilot. And now they've got 3 different versions of upgrades. So it says it took us 45 years to do 2 revisions, and in 3 years we've done 3 revisions.
Yeah.
And so what basically begins to happen, you've got exponential capabilities available on the web, language not being a barrier, not needing to know how to code to write
Yeah.
code.
Yeah.
Okay. And now all of a sudden, the rest of the world catches up. And guess where most of the rest of the world today is? It's in Asia. Tomorrow it'll be in Africa. Right. And I tell people the future has already arrived. It's in Asia. And when you think about AI, I said you should also add between A and I, S and A. So ASAI. Asia.
Yes. Yeah. Which let me add. So I think the point of language is no longer a barrier to learning. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, I already have the visual in my head of that exact quote, except it's going to say language is no longer the barrier to working, because part of what
Yes.
we're together is, hey, you can be working in Singapore, Vietnam, India, you name it, doesn't matter. It's the work itself, which sounds simple to, sounds simple to a lot of people, but it's really a revolutionary leap. One thing I would add though to exactly what you said is when looking at Asia, there's the two E's: energy and education. And so if you look, like, I'll never forget taking the train from Beijing to Shanghai to Shenzhen, there's solar panels on every single roof,
Yep.
right? And so the energy is there. And then education, if you look across Asia, either China or Singapore or other areas, I mean, NUS, if you look at India, what is it, ITT, right? Like the best developers are coming. So,
Yep.
quick question related to Asia. How would you slice and dice it, right? So there's the Korea, there's the China, there's the Singapore, there's the India. Are you including India in that calculation? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm basically considering sort of Asia to basically be going as east, obviously, as Japan, and as west as probably Pakistan.
Gotcha.
Okay, um, and then excluding, uh, for the time being, though they're sort of in Asia, Europe, excluding Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, etc. But if you basically sort of think about it, is if you think about Greater India, which is British India, which is India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, okay, and then you think about Southeast Asia, which is a combination of Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Philippines, right? And then you basically think about the Vietnams and Koreas, and then of course Japan. Uh, what you see is, if you slice it and dice it, there are three big change, and China obviously. There are three big things that are different across these countries, and they're all very different, right? But the three big differences are the following: some of them are in rapid population decline, and some of them are in population increase. So globally in the world this year, there'll be only 7 countries whose population will increase. And the population that are increasing are places like Indonesia, Philippines, and still to a certain extent India. And population decreasing really fast is Japan, Korea, and China. Okay. So the first thing that tends to basically happen is the wealthier of these countries tend to be Japan and Korea, then China, and then the other folks, right? The other folks have larger populations and are growing if you
Yeah.
include China. And these have lots of money, but their population is declining. So it takes about 2.1 children to keep the population the same. That number in the US native is 1.65. So the US is only staying stable because of immigration. That number in China uh, is like 1.2 or 1.3. And that number in Korea is 0.82. Okay, so first is there's a very different mindset, not only on wealth, but on population increase and population decrease, if that makes sense, and because of sort of GDP. But the other thing that is also very, very important is, like, I would have India as one, China as one, Southeast Asia as one, Japan as one, Korea as one, you know, is a key thing. So there's, and obviously, again, India itself is very different depending on where you're in India. So I'm just even there generalizing, but but the real center of what I think the growth of the future is India and Southeast Asia.
Tell me more. Tell me
Okay,
more. And when we say Southeast
so
Asia, yeah,
so what basically, but here's what basically happens is China will continue to be very, very dominant and very, very huge. But China has three big issues right now. So issue number one is population decline. Issue number two is they have their own leadership, and their leadership can decide what's right for China. So I'm not living in China, so I don't know what's right for China. But one of the things they've done is they made everybody in Asia hate them. Okay, so when I was in the
yeah,
Philippines, they hate them. Okay, I mean, these have they become belligerent. So what they've done, India, right, is turning more and more U.S. oriented. Okay, so what basically happened is, strategically, they're seen as a threat, not only to the West, but they're seen a threat to the growth areas around Asia. Then they're forcing the rest of Asia. So that's the second problem with China. So what is the population decline? Second is, like, they're like turning out to be a bully-like thing, which
yeah,
is worrying people. The third, I don't know, because I'm a huge fan of what's going on in China most times. I myself don't would what I've been there 27 times, so I know
yeah.
the place well. I mean, as a tourist, not as a book, not a tourist, but I go there. But the other thing that they basically have is At what stage will the constraints on that the government has stop them from innovating?
Hmm.
Right? Will it
Hmm.
or will it not? There's a chance that it will not. So there's a very interesting thing. For I read in the New York Times the other day, and it's a recent article, and I forget the exact statistic, but this is something like there are 1,500 battery experts and engineers in the United States, and there are 60,000 in
Yep.
China. Okay, so they have 65% of the electrical battery stuff. So when you talk about energy, from electrical cars to batteries to solar panels, they control that, right? And there's something very interesting about China that people don't realize, which I would go to, and they basically truly believe that the last 200 years
Yep.
was a mistake.
Yep. What was it called? The center of
That
humiliation, or yeah.
Yeah, and the reason was it's not like opium wars and Mao and none of that. Okay, it basically was they did not see gunpowder, the steam engine. Okay, so their whole stuff is we are never going to be number two to anybody in technology ever. Okay, and so the big challenge really is they could be amazingly leaders in AI because AI requires data and there's no privacy rules, so you can have amazing data in China. But AI also requires certain degrees of innovation, software, and chips, and may or may not that may be a constraint. But that's but Southeast Asia, like the most sophisticated next Apple phones are not going to be made in China; they're going to be made in India.
Hmm. Tell me more.
Okay, so the most sophisticated Apple, I guess the next ones are 16. So 16 Pro Max is only going to be made in India.
Change.
Okay, and so what's basically beginning to happen, and India is growing really fast, and India is so the world's. I mean, if you look at the world's economies, it's going to be the United States, China,
Yep.
India, right? And then immediately after India, you're going to basically find the cluster of Southeast Asian countries. Because if you look at Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, that's half a
Yep.
billion people.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm very bullish on
And when we
Asia.
look at, if we double down into Southeast Asia, what is the impact of Singapore, and specifically how business friendly they've been, while also being so small yet so, going back to this E and E, right? Education and energy.
Yep.
I mean, I can't think of a better educated workforce and population and just sustainable system.
No, Singapore is absolutely amazing. And we have, I have, they're using like AI and green technology and they're using every kind of thing that they possibly can. But because they also have lots of money, they're deeply
Yeah.
invested across, right? So one of the companies that I went and did stuff for when I went to Asia was for Singtel. Okay, and Singtel basically owns between 20 to 100% of all the leading telecom companies that are not in China or Japan but are in Asia. Forget China, Japan, right? So they own 100% of one of the big companies in Australia. They own, I think, a third of Globe Telecom, which is the dominant one in the Philippines. They own 10% of Bharati Airtel. They own a big thing of Indonesia. So the other thing that they're doing is they're actually recognizing. So the way I look at it is they're trying to bring their governance and their massive wealth, but they're putting it all across Asia, right? In a good place. And what has also basically happened is Singapore has now, again, as I said, because of what the Chinese are doing, and again, they may be strategically correct, which we don't understand. So I never
Yeah.
speak for a country. But because of what is happening in China, all the companies that used to basically Asian companies that used to have Hong Kong as their Asian headquarters have moved all of those to Singapore because Hong Kong is now China. It's not China, right? So you can't have a Asian headquarters in China. So you got to have your Asian headquarters outside China. You can have your China, and then there's so Hong Kong, right, is not what it used to be, and Singapore has got a lot of Hong Kong people coming to it, and so it's become a little bit
Yep.
more expensive. which is one of those interesting things. So you're also beginning to see these amazing things inside Asia, which is particularly
Yeah, no,
fun.
I absolutely love it. So here's so that's the macro, right? Now
Yeah,
let's get into the micro of what exactly is going to happen to companies, right? And I go back to, I'm looking at your book that's coming out in 2025, right? Who
yeah,
will people work for? What will organizations look like? Why people will work? Where will they work? When will they work? And a lot of listeners right now are going, man, I wish I was living in Singapore or India, but I'm not, right? But I'm not. I'm living in
yeah,
London. I'm living in Boston or New York or San Francisco or
yeah.
Atlanta. What the hell do I do? And so, how would we
Sure.
describe now to companies? What is the next 2 to 5 to 10 years? Tell us about what companies are going to look like.
So here's what I believe companies are going to look like. So first is, my book, which is now available for pre-order, but it'll come out like, Feb 4th, because we're
Is it
trying to
February
avoid both
4th?
the elections and the
You picked my
inauguration.
birthday.
Yeah.
Did you know
Okay, so there's your birthday,
thanks for
right?
the
So it was
present.
originally going to be the first thing was they were thinking about fall, but then they said, oh, it's the elections. Then they picked a date, which happened to be inauguration day. So now it's Feb 4th. Okay. And it's set now, and it's up for, uh, and the book is like ready. I'm just going through galleys and things like that. But um, basically, the book is very, very simple. And people who've read it basically say it's also very revolutionary in how simple it is. It begins by saying there are 5 forces that are going to change the world and are changing the world. And if anybody thinks they're going back to 2019, they're full of shit. Okay, I don't care if you're, I don't care who you are, if you're the CEO of God, you're full of shit. Just forget about it. Okay, and I have rational 5 forces that most people haven't thought about, right? So one is generational shifts, which people don't think about, right? Generational differences, declining populations, just demographics. The second one is technology, of which AI happens to be one, blockchain happens to be one, augmented reality, virtual reality. Third is the rise of gig work. Most people don't realize in the US, next year there'll be more people who are freelancers than there are full time employees. Fourth is marketplaces, which is the ability to plug and play into any marketplace in the world. You could basically, whether it's a Fiverr or an Etsy or a Shopify, etc. What people don't realize is 45% of all the products sold on Amazon are made in China. Okay, Amazon is a Chinese company when it comes to that thing, right? So people basically talk about Alibaba. I said, hey, it's also Amazon. If you actually sort of look at it. And then the last one really is the long term impact of COVID on people's idea of why they work. So this whole idea of, for a lot of people, it's no longer I live to work. It's very much how do I fit work into my life.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, for an entire generation who've basically seen everything from 9/11, the Great Recession, and COVID, their whole stuff is, hey, we're not owing allegiance to the man or the woman anymore. We have to be in control of our own
Yeah.
destinies. So here's a really interesting thing. In the United States, 66% of Gen Z who have a full-time job have a side gig or side hustle with which they make money. 76% of people who are of Gen Z want to work for themselves. 86% of the people in Asia want to work for themselves. Okay. Now, I stopped necessarily saying that, but the whole idea is a company is now going to be a conglomeration of companies of one. You're not going to be a part of this nameless horde that people can move around. A lot of people are saying, no,
Yeah.
thank you. I'll do that. I have to have healthcare and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I explained. Now I then talk about shifts. So one is I think most companies are no longer going to only have full-time employees. They're going to have something different than a full-time freelance and a contract employee. They're going to have something called a fractionalized employee. So a fractionalized employee is someone who basically has 100% healthcare benefits, equity and bonus, but they only work either 50, 60, or 70 or 80% of their time. So very much like when you sign up at the beginning of the year to your HMO PPO, what
Yeah.
coverage you want, you sign up at the beginning and say you're going to work 50, 60, 80, 100%. The company then tells you, based on what their needs and availabilities are, what you can work in. And then you spend the other 50% of your time doing 3 different things. You either spend it if you're older, doing things that are not work related, or you basically do it, looking after your family, going back to school, doing a side hobby or passion that you have. Uh, so there's going to be a new type of workforce. Then there's going to be a new type of leader. The office is going to be reimagined completely. In-person interaction is important. Being in an office is not so important. And there's a very big difference between in-person interaction and being in an office. Okay, so there'll be sort of the reinvention of the office, the sort of the reinvention of what I would basically say is what an employee might be. So I call it, and then there'll obviously be new managers, new types of leaders, and then there'll be what I call machine-human coexistence. We will basically work alongside AI. So I think AI should have actually be called augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. It'll augment us, but we'll have to learn how to work with them. So that's the thing. And then I eventually end up so that I say is going to happen right now. And then I say within a couple of years, here's what's going to happen. And that's the last 5 chapters are all begin with the word re, because my book is called Rethinking Work. So my last 5 chapters are called Reimagine the Company with Paradigm Shifts in Mind, which is how do you design a completely new company? How do you retrain workforces? How you redesign the structures? How you recalculate the financials? And how you revision the work rippled world, right? And among those things is, I believe there'll be 2 types of companies: very large and very small.
Tell me more about this. This is, yeah.
So the world will basically be about whales and plankton. There'll be almost nothing in between. Okay. So large companies, there are certain companies that require whale-like sizes to be successful. Pharmaceuticals, chip making, global, highly capitalized companies like a Google and Alibaba,
Yeah.
right? Taiwan Semiconductor, etc. So you're going to have a whole of those. And then they're going to be planktons, which is companies of 1, 10, 15 gatherings together. And that will basically be the ecosystem. Because what will happen is, very much like today, so this is not necessarily a giant, but like one of the things I write is I write on Substack. Because I don't charge, right? I don't pay Substack because my stuff is free. But I have 30,000 people who read me. Okay. Now let's suppose out of those 30,000 people, I actually charged. Okay. And 3,000 people actually read me. I've been paid. So 1 out of 10 actually paid. The others said, go to hell. Okay. And I charge $60 a year. Okay. So I'd make $180,000. 18,000 of that would go to Substack. So they take 10%, right? And then 2-3% go, I think, to Stripe and other people, but 10% would go to Substack. So in my world, if I charged, I'm a plankton.
Yep.
They're a whale, right? But we feed off each other. I use the whale's technology. They take 10% of my earnings. And that's, by the way, how Microsoft works, how YouTube works, how everybody else works, right? So we'll have this ecosystem of plankton and whales. And anybody in between, my whole stuff is you neither have the agility of the plankton nor the scale-based benefits of the whale. What sort of animal are you?
Yep.
Right? And some people may say I'm a shark, and there may be a few times for a few sharks, but everybody else will not exist. And so that's the key thing. But also so that's like a big thing. And also organizations will be very, very different, because if you think about the way organizations were, they were basically built around hierarchies of knowledge and expertise. So I believe that AI is going to make knowledge free and expertise not that important.
Yep.
Okay. And what will be very important is the ability to do 3 or 4 things. So if I were to give advice to people who are listening to this, I said, look, this is what you should hire for. This is what you should build. And this is what you should be thinking about to future-proof yourself. Okay. because this is what I'm doing
Yeah.
and it's working, and I'm informing companies and I'm learning. So, you have to basically invest in learning an hour a day, right? If you don't learn, like I just wrote something about how to learn AI in my most recent Substack, and thousands of people said, "How come you made it so easy and free?"
Yeah.
Right? I said, "Because I spent hours learning and I'm giving you my thought." I said, "Why can't I give that to you free?"
Yeah.
Right? I said, "Why are you spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for consultants who confuse the hell out of you and then say to unconfuse you, you got to hire them for more? What shit is this?"
Yeah.
I said, "In a new world order, you don't do that shit." Okay, so so one is learning, but also what you want to basically do is you want to hire for cognitive skills, which is learning skills, for curiosity and for creativity. Creativity is going to be very important, but at the very same stage, you're going to require people who are very good at collaboration, because you're going to have to work across
Yeah.
plankton and different people and companies. You're going to have to be very good at convincing, which is sales is going to be important, because everybody's going to have the same data, the same knowledge. So you're going to have to like convince, storytell. But the most important skill that people are underestimating is communication skills, writing and presenting. So I'm telling companies, invest in writing skills, invest in selling skills, invest in, right? You keep investing in technology skills. That's important, but that's everyone's going to, and people say, my AI is going to be my differentiated strategy. I said,
Yeah.
bullshit to you. Okay. AI is going to be like electricity. Everyone's going to have it. Only the companies who don't have electricity you can beat. Tell me today, do you go running around saying, I have an electric strategy because I use electricity?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, most of these people, who's informing you? Like, when did you stop thinking? All right. And that is the big thing. Very, very established, amazingly successful people, right, are being led astray by people. My old stuff is, this is a revolutionary time. Think
Yeah.
afresh, right? And I always basically say, if you start with a fresh sheet of paper and all the assets you have and no liabilities and launch a new company, what would it look like? And they draw it for me. And I said, but it looks nothing like the current company. So why are you trying to keep your current company
Yeah.
going?
Now let me so in calling out the five forces, I don't know if you and maybe Rashad, maybe
Sure.
this is why you were even uh I guess you could say nice enough to say, "Yep, I will answer Matt's cold email," right? Because I think so out of the five
Right.
forces, I don't know if you did this intentionally, but two of them are literally exactly our audience, right? So gig work and marketplaces.
Yeah.
But I would argue
Yeah.
we touch all five because when we talk about tech, well, tech has enabled both the freelance economy and gig work, right? And
Yes.
then when we talk about the idea of why we work, well, these individuals are opting for more freelance and fractional type roles, right?
Yes.
So let me ask you a really kind of funny question, which is how come it's not already here? And what I mean by that is I started freelancing in 2012, right? I didn't know it was called freelancing. Then I was early at a startup called Gigster. We did custom software, so $2 to $10 million projects, 100% through freelancers. In 2018, we were growing Microsoft's freelance program, got up to 40 million, and was really light years ahead in terms of how fast we could ship and how efficient we could be. But we're still at a place that freelance is looked at as niche and rogue, and we kind of have these different
Yep.
terms. Now, I will give you some good news in terms of literally in the last week is when we put a little flag in the air to say, hey, executives, do you want to put a quote on your freelance strategy? Rashad, you should see the companies that are reaching out. We're getting like Omaha Steaks, the CEO of Omaha Steaks,
Yep.
hilarious. I would have never imagined that, right? Last year we were
Yes.
talking with an executive at John Deere. So listen, things have changed, but this is my funny question to you: is how come we're not already here?
The reason we're not here, well, there are two ways of saying it. One, we're here, but we aren't paying attention. Where, as I said, next year there'll be more people working by themselves versus for a company. But there are four reasons, and all of those are the forces where I explain why we've arrived at a particular stage. So, in order to do this successfully, you needed a few things. First is you needed enabling technology. Okay. It's much easier with the internet and with enabling technology like Zoom and a whole bunch of other stuff to be a freelancer than you were before. So that was number one. So we did not have these world class marketplaces. All right. We did not have the enabling technologies till 5, 10 years ago. So that's number one. The second reason is we did not have a moment where we always basically were thinking about there's these large companies and then there are these remote losers. Okay. But what happened in March of 2020 is every single individual became a remote loser for 2.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it was like we suddenly discovered why were we working in 2019 pretending it was 2002.
Yep. Which let me make, yeah.
And therefore, yeah. So that did the big mind shift to a great extent. Like when I stopped working at Publicis, for 6 months I was working at home. I didn't feel remote. I said, like, whoever tells you that the center of the universe is in the office, I'm talking to people, I'm meeting people. I don't feel remote at all. What's wrong with you?
Yep.
Right? So the mindset changed because of COVID, while all the technologies came through. Also, because of COVID, people began to ask, what the hell does my boss do besides check in, right? And monitor me and a whole bunch of other people. People also basically said, why do we have so much real estate? Why are we forcing people all to work in the same city? Right? So all of this changed mindsets while the new technology came, and that was the flash moment. That's why I said the five forces, right? And then we had the declining population, the aging population in the US. 10,000 people turn 65 every day. So you've got all of that. You suddenly have this like moment where it all collapses. Now there are a couple of things that we don't have, which is why my whole thing is about fractionalized employee. Today, to me, the biggest last constraint is healthcare in the United States. Okay. And part of it is the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare has helped in that to a certain extent. Now companies are starting to come up to help you with that. But I'll tell you, the moment you basically begin to have, that's why I'm thinking about the augmented, or not the augmented, I'm basically talking about the fractionalized employee. The fractionalized employee is different, versus a contract employee or versus a freelance. The company provides 100% healthcare.
Yep.
Right? And when you have 100% healthcare, plus you can have benefits and 401k plans, again, prorated to how much you work, 50 to 70%. That's the last thing, because what tends to basically happen is people need healthcare. And that's become a big constraint in the US. But now, when all of this comes together, the question simply will be, why do companies exist? Okay. And there's a very famous guy. I'm in Chicago. I went to the University of Chicago. There was a famous University of Chicago professor who basically asked, why do firms exist? His name was
What
Ronald
was the
Coase.
theory of the firm, right?
And
Is
he
that what this
basically,
book was? Yeah.
the theory of the firm, right? Ronald Coase, theory of the firm. And we basically said a firm exists because internal friction, or no, a firm exists because external friction is greater than internal friction, right? Which is, yes, you've got internal friction like bureaucracy and all that other kinds of stuff, but external friction is really hard. The last 15, 20 years have reduced external friction.
Yeah.
You can plug and play, you can get things you want, you can access markets, right? And now, unless we reduce internal friction, the firm won't exist. So in some way, for a firm to exist, they're going to have to be much more distributed and unbundled, right? A firm that insists on all their employees working 5 days of work in one place is set up to have internal friction greater than external friction and will decay.
Yep. Now, yep.
Right. And so when I showed them the logic with my mathematics and economics background, then all of a sudden boards begin to see something different. And I'm also somewhat somewhat believable. Most of the people listening to this are young and talented. I'm aged and not, but I'm aged. And because I'm aged and I talk like a revolutionary and I'm actually living that life, but I was like them, so I understand exactly what's going on there, right? So I'm not coming there screaming, saying you suck, nothing of that saying. I'm saying, hey, to continue to succeed, here's what we have to do. You're world class, but you're world class because you keep adapting, but now you have to adapt to work.
Yep. So actually the theory of the firm was the exact thing that when we had Gigster, we would go, hey, it just makes sense, right? And then we would go meet with these companies and they would say, okay, we get it, but we don't know how to plug you in. So we would say, all right, we have to attach to something else, right? Like I'll give you an example, the say Harley Davidson. You haven't had a mobile app yet that people have actually used. We can fix that. So it's like getting to the actual tangible business cases.
Actually, yes. It is, and now there's so many, and people are realizing. And so what happens is it's happening. And the other thing to recognize, and this is a big thing that most of your listeners know, and that was like the driving force of my first book, is that while the world is digital and data driven and silicon based, you and I are analog,
Yep.
right? Feeling driven and
Yep.
carbon based.
Yep.
And so people change much slower than
And
technology
we're tired.
infrastructure. So that's the
And we're
other,
very
right?
tired, right? And the more the
Yeah.
external presses, the more we get tired. Yep.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. But there's a revolutionary new world, in this new modern world. And so, like anybody who's like been reading my book, and I've got like exactly, they said like, oh my god, it's so clear. And I of course I write it in a very logical, business oriented way. So this is not a screed, right? This is here's some facts, here's some data, and it's like here's how you adapt. I'm not saying companies shouldn't exist. I'm not saying in person isn't important. I'm not saying any of that, right? Uh, I'm not saying one model fits all, right? But I'm saying here are the ways to think about it. And if you aren't thinking about it like this, then be
Yep,
scared.
absolutely. Listen, Rashad, I want to give you 2 minutes, okay? Because I know the
Sure.
most important thing for you leaders listening is to actually take action, right? That is our both of our most important things for this episode is listen, get out there and take action. So I want to give you 2 minutes, Rashad. What literally as practical as possible, what would you tell the executive who has a 50 to $50 million budget, probably has a team of 5 to 500 and is thinking about what do I do in the next year to 2 years? Do I fire everyone? Do I leave my company? How in the world do I lead? So, what would be the tactical things that you would say, okay, you need to do this right now? And one might be go take a nap so you have more energy and then think about this.
Yeah. So here's what I would basically say. Here are the five things that every single person should do, and then they can decide which of these five makes sense to keep doing, right? So start with these five, and then say, okay, this one fits for me or not. The first one is the only non-negotiable, okay, which is start allocating an hour a day to learn, and take it from anywhere but sleep in your family. You can reduce meetings by 15 minutes, watch sports 5 minutes less, go to the shower 5 minutes less, 5 minutes less on TikTok, but get an hour and learn about anything. What will happen is over time you may decide what you want to learn about, right? So for instance, I set aside an hour, to learn about culture. I spend a couple of hours, 2 of my hours have to learn about AI, right? So it's a different things. So spend an hour learning, and that's the only non-negotiable. But what you decide to learn, you can decide to learn, and the ability to learn, you can learn. The best teachers are available for free. They're on YouTube. There are podcasts. There's all kinds of stuff. That's number one. Number two is take a fresh sheet of paper, take all the assets of your company, all your employees, all your money, all your stuff, and basically say, okay, if I were to reinvent my company to solve a problem, or if I were to blow up my company and I was the competitor, what would I do with all the assets that I have and no constraints excepting three? Whatever I have to do has to be legal. Whatever I have to do has to be scientifically possible, and whatever I have to do has to break even in X number of months where X is less than 36. So 3 years or less. You can decide if it's 12 months, 6 months. What would you do? And you can include your team. And when you come up with that, those will be ways you adapt your company. You may not need to blow it up, but you might say, hey, I have invented a new type of company. And again, it's legal, it's financially prudent, it's economical using your assets. But what most people do is they decide to self defeat themselves. World class leaders and companies self defeat by not thinking this way. So that's the second one I do. The third one I'd basically recognize is leadership. Look at how much time you're spending in the last week. If you're a leader, and everybody is a leader, how much of your time did you spend monitoring, measuring, allocating, delegating, right? Or checking in? And how much of your time did you spend creating, building, making, and mentoring and guiding. And if the second section, which is creating, making, mentoring, building, and guiding, is less than 50%, you should be worried. Because the other 50% is going to be done by machines.
I love that.
Okay. So just look at and start moving more into this. And also recognize as a leader, and this is part of number 3, the future is about zone of influence versus zone of control.
Yep.
Okay. Then the fourth thing you want to basically do, which is also important, is think about yourself regardless of the size of your company, not necessarily as the size of your company, and don't even think of yourself as a freelancer. Think of yourself as a company of one. Okay. And there's a book called Company of One, but I've also recently written a series on my Substack, 6 pieces on how to operate as a company of one. And I'm talking about operating as a company of one in a company of 100,000. Right? And actually getting all your people to operate as companies of one. Why companies of one? If you're to be a company of one, what do you have to do? You have to be world class at something. Otherwise, no one's going to hire you. You have to stay on top of the game. You have to be highly collaborative. Right? You have to have good communication skills. You got to do all kinds of stuff. So do that, which should be a company of one. And the last one, and this is the fifth and most important one, not most important one, but as important, is recognize that the future is actually really, really amazing. Okay, we're about to enter the most amazing world for companies, individual, and the world. Don't believe the headlines. When people say the world is coming to an end, I simply ask you, would you rather live in 2020 than 1975 or 1980?
Yeah.
Okay, and with one exception, the only asterisk is basically abortion rights. Okay, in every other case, the world has moved forward. So if you like culture, music, if you suffer from cancer, right, everything is better today. More people have come out of poverty. The headlines tell you the world is going to hell in a handbasket. The reality of it, the world is okay. Thank you very much. So those are the 5 things to think about.
That was beautiful. I'm almost scared to talk because go out and copy that exact 5 action criteria.
Yeah.
Listen, Rishad, this is the first of many, and the second we have your pre-order link, we're gonna add that straight to the description. Yep.
Yeah. So it's already available. So if you go to any, what I'll do is I'll send you a page with all the pre-orders. So depending on what you want to pick, but I've got everything from independent bookstores to Amazon and global. So
perfect. And hopefully, so when our book launched, all of a sudden there was a war over in Europe and and COVID. So I prayers up that come February 4th, maybe that'll be what I'll celebrate. My wife grabbed the book for a birthday gift. But
absolutely.
Listen, Rishad,
thank
you so much for hopping on. And most important question, where can our listeners find you?
So the 3 places you can find me. You can subscribe to my free Substack at rishad.substack.com, and it's free, rishad.substack.com. You can basically find me on LinkedIn at just Rishad Tobaccowala. I'm on X as simply at Rishad.
How'd you get those names?
And my email is rishad@gmail.com. Okay, which is very, very simple. And then you can find my sort of website. And to a great extent, if you search for me in GPT or Claude, the stuff that comes up is actually me, and that's true.
Incredible. That is incredible. Listen, Rishad, thank you so much for hopping on the Human Cloud Pod.